Okay, good afternoon. True collaboration between community initiative and the university research team Parte Artus are presented below. This collaboration represents the key points of reference for the learning and reflection detailed in this oral presentation. The research group participates in two areas. On the one hand, this included the accompaniment of participatory process of coordination and reflection between different organizations and social activists. Especially, this meant supporting the preparation of the methodology for and participation and dynamization of assemblies, meetings, and work sessions. On the other hand, it included conducting specific studies to improve outreach and participation in community space. Finally, it has included the facilitation of conversation and negotiation with public administration and the other agents in the region. The case of Astra was an initiative led by groups and associations in the municipality of Guernica in Vizcaya to reclaim an all-arms factory closed in 1998 and to create a space open the public and their social and cultural initiatives. At the end of 1995 and during 1 year. After several occupations, evictions, and mobilizations, different participatory processes were initiated by the social groups that had occupied the building. A team from the University of Basque Country provides support for the facilitation of this process, which led to successful conversion of the Astra factory in a public community space self-managed by Astra Coordination Community in 2012. The project is currently operational and connects a number of different collectives and individuals. The institutions have allowed the popular initiative continue in pace and to act autonomously, although this relationship has not been without difficulties and tensions. They have also supported the project financially, funding the rehabilitation and maintenance of the building. Both the Guernica Local Council and the Basque have accepted the forest show by the popular initiative, both in terms of their capacity of action, as well as with their capacity to draw up proposals and projects, a time when government institutions had not developed any concrete project for the space. Astra activities underline some key dynamics when analyzing the trajectory of the project and the lesson learning. This includes their ability to anticipate the reaction of institutions when shutting and abandoned building and converting into social care use. Okay. Eta jarraian Astrakoa.
Yes, there is another case this second case is a reference for us and in our communication for this Congress, and it's called Carmela. Carmela is a community project too, but in the city of Bilbao, and is a neighborhood in Bilbao called Santutxu. And as in Guernica with Astra, in November 2015, different associations and groups decide to reactivate the community by the occupation of an old school.
Could I just butt in for a minute? I don't think anybody, I think we're all only being able to see the first slide. So there's maybe something about that. The other thing is, while I've interrupted, Nargis, can you just confirm for me, are there 5 presentations in this?
You can stop sharing your screen and start it again.
No.
Edo zu pasatzen ari zara aurkezpenak? Orain bai.
Oh, now your slide has
Baina,
changed.
hori da.
We can see new slide.
Baina orain arte ez.
It would still be better for it to be in presenter view, if that's possible.
Sorry. Ari dira esaten,
Bai, ez dela ikusten. Ez?
stop sharing.
Orain mugitzen hasi zara eta ikusten zen, baina orain arte ez.
Orain?
Orain ikusten da pantalla. Osa, egin baduzu jarri modo presentación. Ze ikusten da...
Orain bai. Can you see now?
We
Yeah,
can,
we can
we can
see.
see it. It doesn't matter. It's a little bit smaller than it would be if it was in presenter view, but we can see it.
Okay.
Can you
Thank you.
switch the presentation mode?
Yeah, it's in the presentation mode, just in my computer.
Ah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, never mind.
I think it's good. I think it's good. Just while we've stopped for a moment, can I just say, I think we've actually got 5 presentations in this session, rather than usual 3. Am I right, Nargis? Yeah.
Three presentations.
Only 3. That's
From
great. That's great.
Kenya. Yeah, Kenya.
Lovely. Thank you. It's showing up differently on my program.
Do you
Please go ahead.
prefer if we start from the beginning or?
Orain ikusten da Karmelakoa.
No, it's okay. Start from where you are now.
Okay. Okay, so there are 2 community projects that are our reference for our communication. The first, my colleague Andere has been talking about Astra in Guernica, and the second one is in Bilbao. It's Carmela. It's a community project in a neighborhood, and it's a special project because the people who have occupied an old school and they want to auto-gestionate this space for the neighborhood, social, political, and cultural activities. So the project, the community project for them is defined with 3 elements. First of all, diversity and openness for all the diversity in the neighborhood, according to social class, ethnic origin, age, themes, and so on. Second one, they want to construct and transformative alternatives for the problems in the neighborhood. And of course, they are open for any new social or political project by and for the people. So our role as a university research team is the facilitation of meetings and assemblies through dynamics and participatory methodologies, learning from popular education and for the facilitation of organizational processes. And on the other hand, after these meetings or assemblies, we used to systematize all the ideas and decisions that have occurred in these assemblies. So that's our. Sometimes these community agents ask to us for doing specific studies to improve the scope and the dissemination of the initiative. And sometimes we used to do surveys or discussion groups or participatory workshops. And in this, we want to analyze how the rest of the neighborhood, of the rest of the city is looking to the community project. So in order to spread this community for the rest of the people. Nowadays, we are, after these experiences, we are studying some key points in the relationship between public local administration and this type of community process. And we want to share with you some points about that. First of all, we are learning that the public administration must be recognized the legitimate role of these social agents and prioritize dialogue and work in common with them. Second, we think that the administration's job is to accommodate and protect legally and financially this kind of projects. And for example, public administration can facilitate and take charge of bureaucratic procedures. And finally, in order to rethink citizen participation in an innovative way, it's necessary to create a new culture in public administration at both technical and political levels. Nowadays, we are testing this kind of points with qualitative methodologies in base of a qualitative way of taking part with politicians, technicals, and activists too. So maybe later we will talk about these points too. And that's all for us. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Cesar and colleagues. That was really interesting. How we'll run the session is that we'll have the 3 presentations, I think, and then we'll have take a discussion and questions at the end. I should have said at the beginning that despite what it says on my screen at the moment, my name is not Andrew Doherty, my name's Colin Ross. As I say, I've just borrowed my wife's computer. And I'm based in Glasgow in Scotland, and I'm a trustee on the IACD board. Now, who's expecting to go next? I know that we've got Daniel and colleagues, and we've got Jean. Daniel, are you ready to go next?
Yeah, we could go next, but we could also allow Jean to go.
Anybody, Jean, you bidding to go next, or? Doesn't sound like it. Daniel, I think you should go.
Okay, thank you.
So,
thank you very much.
15 minutes, and we'll look forward to it.
Okay, thank you. And I'm presenting from Nairobi, which is 8:15 in the evening. So I would be saying good evening. I'm aware there are people who are still during the day, good day, and those who are just starting the day, good morning, and those who are going to bed, good night. We have a presentation, 3 of us, with my colleagues, Boniface and Stella. I will start making some preliminary remarks, then Boniface will come in, and then Stella, and then I'll come to make some quick conclusions. And so Stella is sharing the slides for us. So our presentation is on inclusive and participatory community development. And we are trying to bring in the concept of Ubuntu so that we can argue that we should not leave anyone behind as we do community development, and more so when it's informed by Ubuntu. Next slide. By way of introduction, we want to start by the premise that inclusiveness and participatory community development is a process whose salience cannot be gainsaid, and inclusion is a value, a right, a principle of holistic community development, and there's quite a bit of that in literature. And again, the spirit of social inclusion is at the core of the rallying core of Sustainable Development Goals which was again the driving spirit, is that no one should be left behind. Well, we might seem tautological in terms of talking about inclusive and also participatory, but the premise is that inclusiveness is a value, is a process by itself, but you can just be included, but basically lack significant voice. And that's why we're saying, in as much as you're included, there should also be an aspect, and a very strong aspect, of participation, taking into account that if we go by the ladder of participation by Sherry Einstein, you can be included and then you are left at very nominal level of participation, where largely you've just been opened the door. But then you also you need to be included, and you also need to be at the top, where you also exercise a bit of agency and in terms of then articulating and ensuring there is control. And that's a bit that where we are bringing the aspect that to a large extent, again, inclusiveness in community development has tended to focus more on persons with disabilities, and rightly so, when you take into account the kind of challenges they have to deal with, to claim the spaces and to be part of the communities that they belong to, and make a significant contribution, as well as have their rights taken care of. But then we also want to appreciate that also inclusiveness also calls for other groups who also face significant barriers in their participation in social life. And for this, we want also to recognize that we have groups like children, we have the youth, we have older persons, we have minorities, we also have indigenous populations, and including also displaced populations who also suffer exclusion. And to a large extent, we also need to bring them on board. When we talk about social inclusion, then we want to be able to create a situation where people can be able to assert their voice and their agency in the spaces that they find themselves in, including challenging the political structures that might perpetuate exclusion for their own benefit. And then again, when we talk about an inclusive community development process, then we are able also to focus on the diverse and also unique needs of individuals and groups in communities, who then require deliberate intervention on an inclusiveness and also a participatory process. And because on the converse, interventions that are not inclusive will even tend to create more social inequalities and therefore compound social problems. Also, interventions that are non-inclusive, they also adversely affect all of us and the community development that we undertake, and make us less and less human. The lessons from the COVID-19 are that community members are first responders. In as much as there is no training and all that, they are found by the issues that they need to deal with, including the disruptors. And to a large extent, then we need to be able then to have communities that understand and take care of each and everyone in the development process. And so by appreciating that everybody in the community has their place and their contribution, then inclusiveness and participatory community development becomes quite important. We also need to appreciate that new categories of excluded populations are going to come as we also face new disruptors. And that means then we need to be deliberately inclusive and participatory in our practice. And that means we need to make then inclusion a norm so that we can safeguard common interests and also, most important, our humanity. I want to invite Boniface to bring in the issue of Ubuntu.
Thank you, Dr. Daniel, and all members who are present. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are across the world. My name is Boniface Munene Rufo, based in Kenya. I'm presenting on Ubuntu as a building factor and a concept for inclusive and participatory community development. Basically, Ubuntu means humanity, having a human face, and it has roots from a community in South Africa called Nguni, and it is adopted as an indigenous approach in Africa with the aphorism that I am because you are. The aspect of sisterhood and brotherhood. A person is a person through other people, And of course, whatever happens to the individual happens to the whole group, and whatever happens to the whole group happens to the individual. So this is evident in our communities today that the aspect of social self is critical because we are actors on the stage. We are not true self because we are embedded within our community, with the norms and the values. And therefore, Ubuntu is an approach that reflects social self. It is beyond the true self. And therefore, this concept, it highlights the relationship that we have with each other within our setup, within our social setup. It is a universal bond of sharing that connects the humanity, caring for each other. That's why we are proposing this concept to be used across the world, not just in Africa, to ensure that there's inclusive yet participatory community development practice. Why Ubuntu? Through Ubuntu as a philosophy, as an approach, there's a reflection of social fabric and the cultural affinity. We are able to have a concrete, a baseline, a foundation of assessing the way we include people within our society based on their culture. And therefore, also through Ubuntu, we are able to reduce prejudices and discrimination. As a matter of fact, today, there are lots of discriminative practices within our society. We have waited for the government and for other organizations, but to some extent, they don't give us or they don't fulfill the needs of our society in totality. So it is within ourselves, building on the spirit of Ubuntu, that we are saying we need a collective development so that you can be able to solve discrimination. And through this, therefore, we create freedom and justice through reconciliation, through fellowship, and harmonious relationships. And this one, as a matter of fact, it is not costly at all. It is not costly at all, building Ubuntu, because it is within ourselves. Through Ubuntu also, we're able to unlock new opportunities, because through sharing, through showing the aspects of caring, we're able to open up our minds and change our thinking based on our values and norms. To be very honest, and this is, of course, evidence also within different setups, a fragmented system that disowns the spirit of Ubuntu produces a dysfunctional society. And this now becomes a basis for acute social exclusion. And it is a downside for our society. On the other aspect, we're also suggesting that Ubuntu can be used as an antithesis to neoliberalism. Neoliberalism has indeed allowed market forces to determine the access and delivery of services to just a few individuals. And this has contributed to individualism, meaning the disadvantaged in our community doesn't have an access to the market to make profit because only a few people have been left. This, therefore, is a gap, is a weakness, again, which allows exclusion to prevail. But there's an ethical care in a humane way that we can use to solve this problem. And this is Ubuntu. Therefore, Ubuntu can be used not only in South Africa or in Africa at large, but even beyond the confines of Africa. And this can be used to solve issues like racial politics in some societies. And to conclude, is that through Ubuntu, we build communism where we bring people together through active participation. And this is now where we are coming in as community development practitioners. For sure, Ubuntu is an approach, but without mobilizing forces, people within themselves, they might not know that they have a valuable asset. So therefore, it is our role to come together and mobilize these forces and encourage willing participation and openness among the community members and groups. Through this, issues that are affecting our world today, the issue of climate change, the issue of hunger, among other issues, mental illness, they will become a collective issues that can be solved in a collective manner. So participants, that's why we're encouraging Ubuntu. We can reflect about it and we can apply it in our different setups. That's the end of my part. I now invite Dr. Stella Masese to continue with the other aspect of social capital. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, and Stella, I mean, if you could finish up in no more in about another 5 minutes, no more than that, is that okay?
Okay, that's fine.
Great.
So basically, I've been introduced, so I will just continue so as not to waste a lot of time. So I'm going to talk about the whole concept of social capital and the aspect of inclusive participatory development, whereby basically we are talking about Ubuntu, which is all about I am because you are, which now is going to thrive or is going to work in societies that have social capital in place. And social capital, which is able to create the different rings, the different relationships, and the different bonds among the different members within these different social networks, whereby we say that social capital basically permits an individual to exercise power in community processes. Everything that happens in a community, basically social capital brings us together and to be able now to exercise these different levels of power, different levels of influencing the different individuals, whereby as we do all that, we are basically trying to reach out and work with different members within these different social networks. As we come together, which basically is the bonding, we are able to reach out to the different individuals, the different members, and then bring them together to be able to work in the different activities that happen within a community, so that as they are able now to come together and work together, then they are going to achieve or experience the different benefits of social capital, which can be enhanced social inclusion, so that as you come together, you're basically bringing the different individuals together to be able to have them working together and even form a network, which as this inclusion is enhanced, then these members are able to attain the different benefits, either social benefits, economic benefits, or cultural benefits or structures, which again depends what that social group basically is trying to, or what that social network basically is trying to achieve or trying to work on within the community. But we find that even as we bring these individuals together, for you to be able to gain from that whole concept of social capital, then one needs to have a potential position, regardless the size of the network, so that even as you come to this group, what position do you have? That social position that you have is going to enable you to get more benefits, to get more rewards from that social network that you have formed as a community or as a group, which at the end, as you have that potential position, then it enables you to become more inclusive and to maybe participate more on the different community processes. But however, this social capital is not homogeneously available to all members of the community because of the social structural barriers, which my colleague Dr. Muya talked before, so that even as we bring these people together, as we form these different social networks, then you find even within those social networks, not all members within that network enjoy the benefits or even enjoy the different levels of participation, or even get to the top levels of participation, simply because of the different structural barriers within our communities, whereby you can be in a group, but within that same group that you are in, or social network that you are a member in, we are still being excluded in terms of the different activities that are happening within this particular social group. So it's noted that different individuals or individuals in society basically work on the aspect of self-interest, where each and every member wants to fulfill his or her needs. So for us to make sure that this social capital is going to be inclusive and it's going to be participatory, then that's where the issue of Ubuntu comes in. How do we reduce the aspect of self-interest to make sure that all the members in a social network are able to gain access, are able to enjoy, and are able to be included in all the different processes that happen within this particular social network, so that as they are able to now come together and include the aspect of Ubuntu, which is all about I am because you are, and anything that happens to an individual affects a group, and vice versa, whatever happens in a group affects an individual. Then this Ubuntu comes in to help the community to have a connected mutual interest, so that anything that happens to an individual is going to affect us as a group. Then we need to work as a group to be able to include everybody. Number two, enhance social participation. As we come together, we have a mutual interest, which now we have to include everyone, and we have to give them the different avenues of participation, which now basically at the end, each and every individual is able to participate in the different activities. And then the last one, able to advance its community-based assets, whereby one of them is social capital. So as you bring in the Ubuntu, which is basically taking care of everybody in the community, then we are able to advance this particular asset within the community. So basically for Ubuntu to inform community development practice, then development of continuous and stronger social capital is necessary. All the bonds, all the networks that we have, we need to continue developing them and to make them stronger so that you can be able to increase the level of participation and inclusion within these communities. So Dr. Muya will come in to make the conclusion, and then that will be the end of our presentation.
Daniel,
Colin, I'll just take 1 minute, and simply what we are saying is that Ubuntu is anchored on social capital, which has to be generated by bonding and connecting. And in the process then, since the communities already know who is who, and they have built themselves together and they are connected themselves together, then they also exercise their duty of ensuring no one is left behind. Then Ubuntu again, and on your that is fragmenting human constitution as it today, that which makes us human. And then our call is that to ensure minimum practice and participatory, but also is as transformative as it is humane. Thank you very much. That's the end of our presentation.
Thank you very much, Daniel, Stella, and Boniface. That was great. Some really some very, very interesting points there about how we might, I suppose, a slightly different way of thinking about community development and values. I'm actually just looking to see if is Jean here, Jean McEwen Short, because I've not been able to find her.
She doesn't seem to be. She was here earlier.
Yeah.
Now that's a bit strange, isn't it? But no sign. Jean, we're looking for you. No, but I don't. perhaps there's been a technical problem, or I don't know. And there's not a co-presenter, I don't think, is there?
Oh yeah.
No. Well,
Not available. But we have a great questions. Maybe we will start our
we do
discussion.
indeed. We do indeed. We have Sarah's question, don't we? In the chat there.
Yes, a question from Sarah.
Yes. So you've raised a question about ecosystem as well as human beings, if you like. And do you want to?
Yeah, I just was really interested to test out on the team what they think about how you incorporate the ecosystem, because your focus was very much on human beings, obviously, because that's what you're concerned with here. But thinking about climate change, and not just the effect of climate change on human beings, of course, is massive and inequitably distributed, but also the idea that not only do we have a responsibility for caring for each other reciprocally, but actually we're part of an ecosystem and we have responsibility for that, humans for the ecosystem, and the ecosystem supports humanity. And I feel sure that the African philosophy of Ubuntu actually sees a human being as integrally related to the natural environment. So quite possibly I know that your concept of human will be different probably from the libertarian Western concept of the individual human, who is both separated from other humans, but also separated from nature. But I just wondered if you had an idea about that. I did find an old blog post by Archbishop Tutu, which was headed Eco Ubuntu. And so what you think about that idea of kind of building the ecosystem into this model that you've got. But thank you very much. I find it a really, really interesting and inspiring presentation.
Okay, thank you, Sarah, for the observation. Of course, we have a much longer presentation, and of course, with the limited time, we've tended to focus more, since community in Rome is more about organizing within the community and ensuring that we have a duty of care. But equally, when we organize a community that is so responsive, we also need to take into account that there's a community subsists. It also subsists within an environment, social the physical environment in which it feeds in. And if then we are going to be very responsible as a human society, caring for each other, we also need to appreciate that our livelihood is linked, and our life is linked with also how the environment thrives, how the natural environment thrives. And so there is that duty of care, that where there is that connection. And that's why we are talking about neoliberalism. Then everything merchandises everything and commodifies everything, both human and non-human. And that's a bit that we are saying we can't be so capitalistic, quote unquote, or neoliberal, so that we forget that as a human society, we need to be humane. And if we are going to be humane, then we also need to take care of our interests, both as a human society and also as a human society that coexists in an ecosystem, which is supported by the social environment, the economic environment, but by also the natural environment, where then in a sustainable manner, we need them to also utilize the resources that are available from the natural environment in a responsive manner, aware that we have a duty to thrive, and we also have a duty to ensure that the next generation thrives by using the resources to meet our needs in a way that is sustainable across the board. And in that case, then we can't leave anybody else behind, because we realize the needs of those who have gone beyond ahead of us, the needs of those who are subsisting, and the needs of those who are going to come. They are intricately interlinked in an ecosystem that needs to have some balance. And that means you need to be very deliberate in ensuring that then we take care of everybody else as we do community development. And that can only be made richer by ensuring that, again, we strengthen the social bonds that exist, because out of the strengthened social bonds and the social capital that we create, then we create a system of holding each other to account, so that then we can live for the collective good rather than for the individual good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel. Thanks. We've got at least one more question direct about Ubuntu in the in the chat there. I'm just wondering, maybe we could bring back Cesar and Ander and Isaro. Perhaps it'd be interesting to hear your reflections on, you know, what you've just heard from the colleagues in Kenya about. To what extent do you think the things they've been talking about relate to your work? Is it different? Is it things you can see reflected in your own work, or as I say, or are there differences? It'd be great to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it's a different approach, of course, from Africa, and it seems to be in the self community, and our approach is more the relationship between community and public administration. But we have learned in our experience that first of all is to have a balanced power relationship between community agents, or social agents, and local institutions. We need a strong community first. So here I can see the link between the colleagues from Kenya and the underlying the Ubuntu, the community integration, the powerful communities. That's the first step. Sometimes we have been working in participatory process, living by institutions, and if we don't have enough power, enough people involved in the community, in the neighborhoods, in the social agents, it's not possible to go ahead with a balanced power relationship with the institutions. So here I can see the link between the both. Well, first of all, community, and later, if we have strong communities, we can go ahead with another topics, with another problems, because usually the community has not enough goods, enough money, enough things to go ahead with some problems, and we need for that the public institutions too. And another point is interesting for me in the Kenyan's experience is that only in our expansion from here, from Basque Country, only if we have a good alliance between community and public institutions, we can do something apart from the capitalist sphere. So we have seen that the neoliberalism is the alliance between the market and the institutions. And we need another alliance, the alliance between community and institutions, because nowadays the power of market and the capitalists is too high. It's too high for community, it's too high for public institutions too, probably. So we are trying in our local sphere and to join together communities and public institutions, and here the public and community logic it is able to do different things, and no according to the benefit, no according to the exclusion dynamics. And that's our approach and our philosophy for working with communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cesar. Yeah, so there's something there about trying to forge alliances between public institutions and communities, and move away from the public institutions being mainly allied with private sector bodies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I was struck by one of I think it was when Daniel was speaking. You mentioned about, you talked about some of the experience about COVID and the lockdowns and how important communities had been as first responders. And I think you put in a note there about, even if there are, well-funded services in place, if you like, but obviously there is a difference between the situation in countries where, maybe like Spain, where there are relatively well-funded public services, and others where maybe that's less the case.
Yeah.
I don't. There's a question a little earlier there from Marion, and I think you'd said, how do we foster Ubuntu, raising awareness of I am because you are. Would you like to sort of expand on that a little bit and tell us your thinking on it?
Yeah, before Lois comes to expound on our question, just to quick comment on what Colin, you are raising about COVID. The point we are raising is that when COVID came in, the reaction by governments across the board was to lock down everybody. And that even created situations where even the responders, institutionalized responders, could not even reach communities who needed to be reached.
Yeah.
And these people, the people who are in need, were within communities, and it's the communities who use the resources that they had to take care of the needs that existed before the governments figured out eventually to reach out to those who are in need. And that means, irrespective of how a government is resourced or organized, when some of these disruptors come in, where we don't have a systematized way of dealing with them, then immediately the communities are left to their own designs to take care of all this, to take care of the immediate needs. And it is the community organization, the community setup, that then exercises their duty of care to first and foremost take care of their immediate needs before any outside agencies come in. The traditional approach, whenever disasters have come in, and it's already documented in disaster response manuals, the big agencies, the first thing they do is to go and do a feasibility study and do a mapping and understand what the situation, and then eventually put together an intervention mechanism. Yet people need to live on a day-to-day basis. And it is the communities which ensure in such situations that first and foremost people can be able to remain alive and to take care of their basics on a day-to-day basis before they get any outside intervention. And the communities know who is in extreme need and who needs to be taken care of even before the responders from organized systems come into place. And that's the point that we are saying. This was amplified by the COVID situation, which paralyzed governments across the board. And ultimately, it brought in the importance of strong communities. When we talk about then getting things happening within communities and responding to the needs of communities, and ensuring that first and foremost, the community develop, the community setup, the community organization, the community systems need to be in place and healthy as a basis for then any further intervention from outside. And that's our thesis, that let's first build strong communities, then everybody else can come on board. But we can't build strong communities if then again, we don't exercise empathy, we don't open ourselves to each other and exercise our humanity, which again, humanity is learned. We start by being human beings driven by instinct. And when we are threatened out of survival, all humanity disappears and we first look out for our own immediate needs. And you can see the panic that came in when COVID came in. Even non-essentials disappeared from the shelves in supermarkets and shops. Everybody wanted now to stock up, but for how long? Okay. And this is a bit where we're saying, look, rather than everybody stocking up and creating unnecessary shortage, is a question of realizing we are all in this together. We are going to survive, all of us together. So whatever resources exist within our communities, let's use them for our collective survival and our collective thriving. Then we can get whatever else comes in to supplement what we already have. And that's then can only be done through the duty of care and the Ubuntu that we're talking about, and then developing very strong social capital basis. Let me allow Lois to expound on our question, then we can respond.
Maybe to add something small through Collins. We have an experience also in Kenya. We are in the post-election violence in 2007, 2008. It is the spirit of Ubuntu and the social capital that enabled most of the people who are affected, especially on the Rift Valley side in Kenya, through Ubuntu and social capital, they were able to resettle. So therefore, we are basing our point also from such events that has occurred in our country and in Africa. Thank you.
It's a really interesting comment, Bon. In fact, what strikes me in what you say there is that the media reports we saw here, if I remember rightly, we heard a lot about the violence and the conflict, if you like, around the election, but I don't think we heard much about community resilience in the face of that, if you like. So we possibly just, you know, we heard one side of very much the negative side of the story, you know, whereas you've just been saying there was probably another story to tell.
Yeah, Colin, that's the truth, because if the truth is told, if the communities did not take care of each other and ensure safety for everybody else, including communities who otherwise would have been the enemies, quote unquote, then we would have had a more serious tragedy than happened in Rwanda. But because communities still realize they need each other and they have lived together, this is a political situation that is passing, then there was a lot that was contained within communities. And so the problem did not escalate to levels that otherwise the media was trying to indicate it reached. Of course, the situation was bad. It's bad enough to lose one life, but all the same, the situation was that people were able to exercise duty of care, and the human communities created safe corridors, even before governmental systems created unsafe corridors for those who needed to be evacuated, for those who needed to be taken care of, and to be able to reach destinations which were safe, even before any other responders came on board.
May I come in, Stella?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, maybe let me add something small and then the shoot can come in. Maybe from the point of awareness, maybe now that the question has been asked, I'm trying to think about it, like within the community level, basically how can we do awareness of this whole concept of Ubuntu, whereby I am because you are, meaning all these community members are going to either increase their different development activities or inclusion or participation, depending on the other members of that particular community, which got me thinking about the whole concept of the asset-based community development, which basically we can be able to use to create awareness so that each and every person in the community basically has a given asset or is exposed to a given asset. So how can you, basically we can be able to use that to be able to show each and every person is important within these particular groups, so that whether I have the fiscal assets and you have the financial assets, we can be able to combine the two and be able to work forward our different development activities, which basically can be one aspect of trying to create this awareness that each and every person in a community basically matters at their small points or larger points or whatever they can be able to offer, which now can be used to be able to synthesize people to know that each and every person in a community matters at their own different levels, using that model of asset-based community development, which now you can be able to tie to the whole concept of the sustainable development goals where we started from, basically not leaving, or the whole concept of not leaving anybody behind. So how do we make sure that all these people basically are on board at their own different capacities, but where we are able to respect that these people with their lowest rank or lowest level, they still matter in the whole process of development within the communities. Yeah, the shoot, you can go on.
Sorry, just to, I think Cesar and Dare are still there, but they're going to have to go, unfortunately. So just to say thanks so much for your presentation. We'd love to hear more, but obviously you can't stay with us. Excuse me. Yeah.
You want me to go in?
Yeah. Was there
Can
something? Perhaps
Yes,
I should have
okay.
said really.
Okay.
perhaps if
Oh,
people-
we're out of time. Okay.
No, it's okay. You please go. Please
Just a quick, speaking from a fellow African continent, we should not underestimate or should not confuse Ubuntu with capitalism versus communism and that type of thing. It's not on that level. Ubuntu is beyond that. I think a very important thing is it also doesn't nullify differentiation. It is I am through your eyes who you are. It is this vice versa. Ubuntu is actually, in that sense, a very high tolerance for human differentiation. I understand who you are and you understand who I am. That is why we could work together. It is seeing me through your eyes and seeing you through my eyes. And to think that Ubuntu is just erasing all differences. That's not true. Ubuntu is recognizing the difference with respect. I'd like to hear Boniface on this one.
Boniface, do you want to respond to that?
The shoot that you're indicating, because when you talk about Ubuntu, what you're talking about is that irrespective of our differences in social status, there is a recognition that whatever station you are in, you belong to the whole. And so whether you are in the bottom of the pyramid or you are on top of the pyramid, you belong to one. And so your station is for the benefit of everybody. And those who are in the bottom, of course, in as much as they will exercise and bond horizontally, there's also bonding vertically. And that's a bit that then there is that continuous interconnection, so that then everybody takes care of the needs of everybody. It's not
including, which includes the environment. So that is why Ubuntu is such a
that includes
very
the environment, because we also want to thrive. Yeah. We also want to thrive in also a physical environment that is also thriving. And so that duty of care for each other also is duty for care for the environment, because the environment is the one that sustains us. And that's very important. What again, Lois was indicating was that the whole issue of how do we get this process going on. Unfortunately, over time, because of neoliberalism, capitalism, and all that, we have tended to commodify even services that otherwise would be taken care of by communities, and putting some market value of sorts. Yet, if communities are going to also continue to remain strong, then there is that duty of care that you can't commodify. Caring for the elderly cannot be commodified. Caring for the young ones cannot be commodified. Socialization, the whole issue of nurturing and teaching and learning cannot be commodified. And this, what now we need to zero value some of these services, so that again we can find the human ethic and the human value in being able to take care of each other, even in their points of weakness. Because at that point, that's where we find our humanity. Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel. I'm sure there's more to be said on that one, but I was just going to check with Marion whether you were in, maybe the point you raised earlier on you might feel has been covered, but I don't know whether you want to say anything about that. Maybe Marion.
Sorry, yeah. I think that there's been some good discussion that has helped me sort of think about it, but I guess this concept, it's entrenched in a culture based on language, and I love it. I think it's amazing. And I guess, coming from Canada, and we're sort of more individualistic, but some of us in community development are wanting more Ubuntu and that's not entrenched in language and culture. And so I guess that's where my question was coming from. I like Stella's comment about sort of, I don't know, looking at ABCD as a way to sort of show the various strengths, but I think it's a philosophical thing that I'm kind of wanting to know how to impart that.
Thank you. I mean, I wondered if part of your question was around, well, there's a concept, how is it put into action?
Well, yeah, that, but also like, I think action is easier if everyone's on the same page philosophically, right? That's, I guess, so it's about trying to kind of change the mindset a little bit in a community or system so that Ubuntu, efforts are more easily offered.
Thank you. Any responses from the team on that? I mean, if not, I had a kind of question just arising from the, what Devet was saying and some of the things that had been said earlier about, and I wondered if is there a discussion there about, some of the things that were in the slide were, to me, were sort of fairly clearly sort of articulating Ubuntu as something that was, you could see as being in opposition to free market capitalism, neoliberalism, whatever the phrase we want to use. You were sort of saying, well, it's not really, this isn't really to do with the difference between capitalism and socialism or communism or whatever. Are there kind of differing views about what Ubuntu might mean in that sense?
You could have Ubuntu within capitalism. That is bringing the human back into the system. It is not necessarily saying it is that capitalism is the villain in the story. It's not the case. Ubuntu is a value system, a human philosophy deeply rooted in I am because you are. The same principle lies in the Rainbow Nation you mentioned. I am because you are. And it is no, I just think we should not move in direction in using Ubuntu, or put it this way, my understanding from Africa as an African is that Ubuntu is not a part of the fight of capitalism versus communism. It's not part of that fight. No, it's part of the human spirit, being human. May I call it being humane? Whether you're in a capitalist environment or not, doesn't matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, certainly one thing I would have picked up that it's not about state control versus the private sector as such, but I'd be interested to hear whether Daniel or Boniface or Stella has any further comments around that area.
Yeah, the point we are raising and the point David is indicating is that capitalism will thrive, but the capitalists can also need to appreciate, even as they make their profit, they also need to make a profit in a way that then does not dehumanize everybody else. And that profit, if and when it is made, also it's also subject to the needs of the community. And that's why you find the aspect of a community philanthropy, where the resources that have been generated from within the community, they can be used also for common good, including then those who are making so much money through the market system, realize that they also have a duty to the community to take care of their needs. And that's where in some cases there is always a question of then where do you draw the line in terms of then misuse of some of these resources. And then also when you have a very strong ethic of Ubuntu, then communities can very easily hold to government to account government systems and the corporates when they are making whatever resources, whenever they are making whatever profits that they are making, because then there is the aspect of being told to be also responsible citizens in that ecosystem, so that they don't thrive at the expense of everybody else.
Thanks, Daniel. I see there's a comment from Carol in the chat. I don't know whether you would like to come in, Carol, and say something around your comment there. You mentioned that you feel you can see brief instances of the Ubuntu philosophy in the US when communities come together to face a disaster or crisis. So I don't know whether you want to expand on that at all.
Well, I would. I also see Mendice has had her hand up for a little while, if she'd like to speak.
That's quite okay, Carol. You can go ahead. I'll go after you.
Oh, I just, as I'm listening and digesting, it reminds me of, I'm in the South, and I've been through quite a few hurricanes, and that feeling of everyone is in your community is on the same page. It doesn't matter if you have 10 cars or none. If you can't get out on the roads to get to your resources, it kind of it puts everyone closer to an equal playing field, and people come together. I've seen it after every hurricane I've been through, and to me, that's that Ubuntu, what I'm hearing, Ubuntu feeling, and how do we capture that? I hear people talk about the day after September 11th and go, remember when we all were hurting the same way and we all came together to try to heal together, and that, has fallen away. How do we capture that and make people want to feel that way so they thrive in their communities and become involved?
Oh, that's a nice one.
Carol.
And the point you are saying then, it should not be just episodic, and it needs to be made part and parcel of everyday existence. Otherwise, then that's what now we are saying. After these disasters, we say people, you need to go for psychosocial care. You come out feeling good, and eventually you run back again into a individualistic kind of existence, without realizing that that's just a temporary relief. You need to be part and on an everyday basis, realizing that even there's going to be another episode, and you're not going to look for your neighbor when the next episode comes in. You need to be with your neighbor even when you are waiting for the next episode, and then you can be able to respond together, connected and strong, and aware of their strengths and aware of also their weaknesses, so that then you can leverage on the best that you have as a community. And that's a bit we are talking about social, the issue of exploiting the assets that exist in the community, because the communities themselves, they're able organically to map out the resources that they have, and they know at the point of need, then what resources to tap from which corner and from which individuals from within the community.
Thanks, Daniel. Mandisa, I'm so sorry, I missed your hand earlier until Carol pointed it out. Please come in.
No worries. Thank you very much, Colin. And I thank you again to all the presenters. And I think that my comment has already been covered actually by Daniel, to touch on the history of Ubuntu, and it not just being a philosophy, but it being a way of life, and speaking against systems of oppression, and recognizing that we are the humanity in each one of us, and that we should also be at one with the environment, as the provider of sustenance, not just for each one of us, but also speaking to community, communityness. I think one of the comments that David made was in relation to communism, which was also one of the terms linked or that was on the presentation. And I think that maybe my understanding is that it is more about taking a village to raise a child, putting and pulling resources together, community resources together to make sure that everyone is taken care of, and recognizing each other, and not being individualistic and building ourselves at the expense of other people or at the expense of the environment, in actual fact. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Modest. I mean, one of the things that strikes me is that we've, both in the presentations, there was mention of COVID, and I think Daniel and co, you'd said, basically that we need to be ready for more such crises in the future than we've had in the past. Every reason for thinking that. And then Carol spoke a bit about that and about disaster responses. I think where I am, I would say that after lots of talk about how we were going to learn from COVID and do things differently in future, it would appear to me that absolutely nothing's been learned from it, really. Maybe it's been learned in communities, but it's certainly not been learned in the places where power's held. And I wonder if anybody has any thoughts on, how we go from having the short-term response of pulling together when there's a real crisis towards keeping that going and building it more into our communities and our ways of working.
That's a nice one, Colin.
It's managed to silence everybody.
Taking into account that the behavior of government was seen in terms of what happened in your number 10. When people out there trying to survive, the people in number 10 were still having parties. And these are the people who should have been learning lessons and preparing for the next and the next and the next. And it is just not number 10 and the rest of the other number 10s across the world. If that is what was happening, then the communities are on their own. And that's what now we need to really make noise about as practitioners, that out of those lessons and seeing how the governments have behaved and also the corporates behaved, then we need to have to start a groundswell where we are saying, look, the communities, they need to hold the people we entrust with our taxes to account so that, again, they can use those resources and they put systems in place so that when the next situation arises, then we already have an institutionalized way of responding rather than just the government's feeling good that they have overcome the tragedy and then they can move to the next, rearrange the budget and move on. When again you look at even the distribution of resources to respond to COVID across the globe, where even the government now it became a question of who can control what resources. It doesn't matter what happens to the rest of the world. And in the global south, it was very evident with the distribution of the vaccinations, where the rest of the world was left out and 3 or 4 countries were able to control everything. The question is, they can thrive, so many of them. But if the rest of the world comes out sick, then we'll infect all of them and they'll be gone together with us. And so they needed to realize that they are safer when the vaccines are across the board. And that's the ethic of care that we are talking about. So that then you can ensure that you can say that you are safer when your neighbor and the next person is safe than being safe alone, which is what we saw now with irresponsible governments. And it's us now to make all the noise that can be made. So that then we tell the governments, they need also to embrace the fact that we live in a very interlinked world. And some of these things we are seeing, it doesn't matter how powerful the government is. It's a question of how the international community is connected to be able to respond as one, as a human community in an ecosystem that is subject to threats that are beyond the capacities of even some of the strongest governments.
Thanks, Daniel. It'd be great to hear from anybody, other people in the group, just whatever your comments are, any reaction to what we've heard, both from Daniel and Boniface and Stella, but also from the earlier presentation from Spain. Any reactions at all? Anything that rings a bell with your experience and you feel that you could learn particularly from what's been said? Apologies.
I would like to say thank you to Daniel, Stella, Boneface, and all our participants today. Thank you for your comments, for this interesting discussion. And the idea of Ubuntu is very close to our team. It's very close to me. And the main idea that it's not just a philosophy and it's the way of life. Yes, it's a lifestyle. I think it's the main idea, and I am because you are. It's so beautiful and it's so important. Maybe you can give us some simple examples from your practice. How does it look like in your everyday living, in your everyday practice? This idea, I am because you are.
Daniel, do you want to say something about that? Or?
I'm sorry, can you hear us?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think what Nagis is indicating is that looking for concrete examples on a day-to-day basis, and this a bit, for instance, we want to indicate it's a philosophy, it's a way of life that then is operationalized on a day-to-day basis, and that's how our communities, to a large extent, are organized. And when you come to some of the corporates, it becomes very difficult to understand how everything is structured. Of course, you can start now talking about things like nepotism, when everybody is taking care of everybody, of course, within limits. But the starting point is that the socialization at the household level, where then the whole aspect of communal living, sharing, is instilled as a normal way of living. The whole issue of living with everybody else in the neighborhoods, okay, irrespective of whatever situation they're in, is instilled as a way of life. The whole issue of bringing down the aspect of competition, again, is brought down, so that then everybody realizes you are better off with everybody else moving at the same level. And within our context, the Kenyan context, we have the self-help movement. The rallying call for our country is Harambe, that is pulling together, and that's what is inscribed in our coat of arms, a nation of pulling together. And most of what is done in our community is done on a self-help basis. Whatever need whatever need arises, people come together irrespective of their station to take care of that particular need. A child is born, things need to be done, the community comes together. You have a funeral, it is a community affair. It's not a question of you can afford to finance your funeral. It is a community affair. People need to go to school. That child is a child of the community. Everybody chips in to ensure that child goes to school. An individual is in hospital and has a bill. Of course, our health insurance systems are not that strong. That bill becomes a community bill. In these days of WhatsApp, you find groups coming together to address a collective need. And a group is created and everybody comes in, and within a short while, you see resources pouring in, and a bill is taken care of quite easily. The savings culture in our country, again, is driven by self-help movement. If we have every other individual belongs to a small group, where the bonding aspect and then addressing a practical need, including saving for investments. And these become vehicles for mobilizing a lot of resources. If the money is saved by such self-help groups are removed from the banking system in this country, the banks would collapse because there is so much money that has been mobilized through such efforts to take care of collective needs, on top of ensuring that it's an opportunity for people to meet on a continuous basis. And every other group meets almost on a regular basis. We have the concept of temple banking, where even the most modest of our groups would meet on a regular basis, put their money on the table, and then it goes with one individual to take care of their needs. When they meet next, the same money is put in, and then it goes to the next individual to meet their needs. The whole idea is not the amount of money that is put on the table. The whole idea is that you have a group you can meet with, bond, network with, and in the process, also some resources are mobilized to take care of very practical needs on a continuous basis. And that in itself then continues to strengthen our sense of collective existence and our sense of collective responsibility to each other.
Thanks, Daniel. Mandisa, I see you're looking to come in again. Please go.
Thank you again. I think Daniel has already captured what I really wanted to say. I mean, within the CBM work, we have also what we refer to as VESAs, which is the Village Economic Savings and Social Associations. So precisely what Daniel was speaking to, of people coming together and putting their resources together and sharing amongst themselves, to enable there to be a system of microfinancing for people within a certain community. Another practical example actually of Ubuntu in South Africa that has actually systematized and became a really successful model was the Mothers to Mothers model that originated in Cape Town in South Africa, and they've now have programs or projects all across the continent. And it really spoke to a group of women that would take care of each other and help share their experiences, through their HIV journey and through their pregnancy journey. And that actually also was able to influence and have an impact in the decrease of the transmission of HIV from, mothers to children, which is where it actually all started from. So, I mean, so those are some of the examples, concrete examples that would speak to Ubuntu and how it can actually be systematized and be used for greater good. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is anybody else waiting to come in? No, I can't see any hands up. I wonder if I could just pitch something in. We're nearly at the end, but just for a quick comment. I mean, there's been there's a strong emphasis on some of the discussions we've been having about human rights. How do you, as I say, maybe this is too big an issue to raise at this point, but if you could, maybe it'd be interesting just to hear a very brief comment on how you think that relates to, or how Ubuntu relates to that discussion.
Boniface, you want to comment on human rights? You are muted.
Unmute your mic.
Boniface. Boniface, you are muted. Okay, the issue, Colin, you are saying is one of the issue of drawing a line between human rights and the place of Ubuntu. And when you go to the only aspect of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and there's a subsequent legislation and conventions that have been developed since then, they go into the core of protecting and ensuring that our humanity is preserved, is ensured, is promoted, is protected. And that's basically what you're talking about then, human rights, really finding the whole movement of human rights, then finding their root and their anchor in our humanity, which is Ubuntu. If we didn't misbehave and start all these wars and all these conflicts, we wouldn't be having a universal declaration of human rights, where we need to reassert that first and foremost, we are human beings, and our sovereignty, in as much as it's individual, it's also collective, because then ultimately we need to ensure that each individual, as much as they have promised all these liberties, those liberties can only exist within a context that takes into account the liberties of everybody else, the rights of others. And at that point, then you draw a line that the individual has no right, to the extent that those rights are infringing or in conflict with the rights of others. And so you can only exist if the other person exists. And you can only have rights if the other person also have their rights taken care of. And
Daniel,
that's the premise of human rights.
Sorry. Let me comment.
You just want a quick word here, yeah.
Yes, please. Actually, today you also realize that government have realized that it is quite difficult to have policies based on top-down approach. So therefore, building from inside out is also coming out clearly, where the government and other bodies are going back to the roots, back to the communities, to start from the community. So therefore, you can see in terms of human rights and advocacy, a lot is happening and the people are starting from the roots. So they have realized that there are lots of things that can be harnessed from our communities, then coming upwards. And to me, that's what I call sustainable kind of engagement.
Thank you. It is 7:30. I haven't seen anybody else looking to come in, so I think we should probably finish there. Just really to say, well, thanks to everybody for participating, and I suspect some people are participating at a fairly unsocial time of day or night. So, as I say, many thanks to everybody that's here, and thanks to Nagas as ever, and thanks to a pity other colleagues are away from the Spanish colleagues, but thanks to them, and thanks to Daniel and Boniface and Stella for really. I certainly found that a really interesting session, and I got the impression everybody else did. Maybe we could just have a little round of applause, whether visual or audible, for the presenters. Thanks everybody. So let's look forward to the rest of the conference. And I say I hope that's been a good day for everybody. Thanks again.
Thank you. Bye.
Good night.
Thank you.